What a week, poddies. It's been exciting over here. We've been doing some really cool stuff behind the scenes at Smart Leaders Cell / Converting Corporates HQ. It's been a really busy couple of weeks. We're gearing up for the Converting Corporates event. By the time this airs, the Converting Corporates event will have happened, which is a terrifying thought, like genuinely quite a scary thought. Even though it's a really good position to be in, I'm sure that after the event has happened, I'll just be on that adrenaline rush. I need to eat quite a lot of biscuits, drink a lot of wine, and just be like, whew. But that's where I am at the moment. And it was actually lovely to take some time out of my day today in my content creation week and talk to the lovely Nicki Louise James, who we have on the podcast today. And Nicki is a branding expert. And I was really interested to have this conversation because I firmly believe that as an entrepreneur, there are two sides or two camps that you may sit on as an entrepreneur when it comes to prioritizing anything other than sales. So either you are like me and sales comes first in your business. So when you start up your business, sales is the first thing you focus on. When you are doing your daily activities, sales is the first activity that you do every day. When you are focusing on your business performance, revenue is like the top thing that you measure or the thing that you measure first. And everything else is secondary to that. Now, it's a bold statement to make, but we all know that my firm belief is without profit, you're running a very, very expensive hobby. So for me, sales is something that needs to be right at the top of the list. And that's why I sit so firmly in that camp, sales before everything. Not everything. Okay, I just want to point out, Max also snorted there, so he doesn't believe it either, but sales before everything other than integrity, because integrity has to be top number one, top banana, all the good things. Or there's the other camp. And the other camp, interestingly, may prioritize other activities over sales, but most commonly, they prioritize things looking perfect, right? So I often hear from a lot of business owners who are like, Jess, I would love to be selling stuff, but my website doesn't look how I want it to. My brand isn't put together yet. I haven't worked on my images. I haven't had a photo shoot. I don't know what color my graphics need to be. I don't know what my fonts are going to be. And that's the second camp. And that for me is really frustrating in some ways because I believe, and actually during this conversation with Nicki today, it's something that we explore. My belief around branding is that branding isn't just about the visual representation or how your business looks. It's about the core values that go into your business. It's about the messaging that you use. It's about how you create a congruent business that represents you as a business owner wherever it goes. The interesting thing for me is that so many people worry about having the perfect website or having the perfect images, and they don't prioritize the parts of the brand, so the messaging or the core values that actually can lead to sales. Instead, they focus so hard on a visual representation that they don't necessarily focus on the parts of the branding or the brand building piece that falls fairly naturally at the beginning of your business. And if you focus on sales right from the beginning, or you focus on sales as a priority, a lot of those brand building activities will be happening because they are part of that sales process, right? Your messaging is an integral part of your sales process. Your core values are an integral part of your sales process. They help people understand whether you are aligned to be working with them or not. And so I was really interested and intrigued to have this conversation around branding and see whether there really is a happy medium. Is there a right time to build your brand? Is there a different way of thinking about branding? And actually, Nicki, later on in the episode, she talks about the difference between a brand and branding. And it's actually a really, really powerful point. So make sure that you listen out for that. As always, I hope you enjoy the episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I enjoy recording it. And let us know how we did on this one and whether or not your feelings around branding changed during the episode, what you feel is most important about building your brand, and most importantly of all, what you're going to do moving forward to make sure that you build a profitable brand that ultimately serves you. Well, Poddies, how cool is this? Starting a Friday talking about branding with the lovely Nicki Louise James. Nicki, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
You are welcome. I'm very excited about this. I also realised that having just hit record, I should have asked, are you a Nicki or are you Nicki Louise? Like, what do we need
Could
to
you
refer
imagine? I'm just a Nicki, but you know
Okay.
what? Like, because I spell my name so funny, I thought like I'll just put Louise James in there as well, because then people can find me on Facebook, because I spell my name so ridiculously that everybody always spells it wrong. It's either a Nicky or a KKI. No one ever spells it my way. I'm just weird.
You're just unique. That's what it comes down to.
That's what I'm all about.
It's so interesting, isn't it? People get my name confused quite often, and so whenever I book a table anywhere or anything and I'm trying to spell out Lorimer, and people go, oh, I know how to spell that. I'm like, okay, sure you do. And the amount of people over the years that have actually got it right is like 1%, probably. And we laugh about it, me and my friends, because we've all got relatively strange surnames. And we always look at, okay, what if people actually got it wrong as what's the best one? And the best one I ever got was somebody who was so confused about my surname, couldn't spell it, didn't really know what it was. When we actually got to the booking for the hotel, they said, we don't have a Jessica Lorimer, but we've got a Jessica Lawnmower. Is that it? And I was like, probably.
That's absolutely brilliant. We always have the problem, like if my husband ever books at a restaurant, because his last name's obviously James,
Yeah,
everybody always calls him James. I was like, no one would have a name like that. Would be very unfortunate.
I'm sure there is someone out there who's like, yep, that's me.
That's
Michael.
me. Sorry, James.
That's incredible. So I'm excited to have you on the show today, and I'm excited to talk about branding. It's not something we have really kind of covered on Smartly to Sell before, because I remember starting out with my business. I mean, I'm like one of the OGs elephants in the online space. So it's been 5 years, almost 6 years now, since I started my business. And I remember, when I left my corporate job and I started my business, I didn't A, have the money to spend on branding, and B, a lot of people in the online space I didn't really trust with regards to branding, because everyone was like, oh yeah, it's just the fonts you use and the colors. And coming from a corporate background where I was like, I think it's more about like value statements and mission and like other things, not just visual representation, people were a bit freaked out. And as a result, I never got pitched for branding. Like nobody to this day, nobody has contacted me and been like, Jess, your website is crap, please can we help you redo it. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Perhaps my views on branding were just so strong back in the day, but I'd love to hear about your thoughts on branding, and why you got into it.
I think that's so interesting that you expect that people would come and pitch you and be like, can I rebrand you? I would never have the balls to do that. Maybe that's where my like short start going up to like high level coaches and being like, hi, your website's crap, work with me. But I think, do you know what? I think it's kind of like, you're completely right. There's so many brand designers out there that go, oh yeah, it's just about like getting a nice logo, a website and stuff like that. And you know what? That's a massive part of what I do. But a massive reason why I'm probably quite different is I'm all about your values and what you stand for, and the fact that your brand isn't just a logo and a website, to the point where I can get a little bit ranty pants about it. So I'll try and behave. But yeah, like people underestimate the fact that their brand is just the glue that holds everything together. So I kind of came into this in like I started as a wedding stationer, so it was so random. And I decided that, it was really important for me to be able to help people more. And I was throwing away all of these skills. And I could see when I was looking at other entrepreneurs, like these people hiding behind their logos and websites and not actually putting themselves out there as the face of their brands. And I think as small entrepreneurs, that's what we need to do. We need to get out there and grab our clients by the balls and go, you know what, like we're the people that you need to work with. And I actually think people don't do that enough, and people don't realize that, like once you get your message sorted and what you really stand for and who you are as an entrepreneur, you're a lot more attractive to your clients and everything becomes a lot easier.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because like it sounds like for you, branding starts with message, and I wholeheartedly agree. Like I come from the corporate world where values and or certainly core business values and messaging and creating powerful content is a key piece of making sure that your marketing works, attracts the right people, repels the right people, and ultimately helps you generate those qualified leads. And I think it's so funny for me that when we look at business in the online space, branding is typically about, well, have you got photos outside the Eiffel Tower? And actually, I think those are starting to go out of fashion now, I'm going to be honest. It's more like
coffee shops. Like the amount of people that I see who have got photos in coffee shops. So like my brand photos are completely the opposite. Like it's me sticking my tongue out or pulling funny faces or like completely going against the grain, to the point that I'm actually considering my next brand photo shoot like almost doing a piss take of the stereotypical like entrepreneur. I'm in a coffee shop with my coffee cup typing away, because this is what I do with my life all the time. Who has time to go and sit in coffee shops all the time having pretty pictures taken? Like, so I'm trying to encourage people to be more real. Like, let's just be ourselves. So if you are a bit quirky and you're a bit like, I'm a bit of a character, so like I want to showcase that, like I want to be who I am. So yeah, I do think that sort of the stereotypes are sort of, we look at everybody else and see what everybody else has done, and we stop thinking about how we can be different. And actually you almost need to do all of those foundations first, so understanding your message and what makes you different and what you stand for, because that's the stuff that appeals to your clients. And then you make sure that all the other brand stuff that you're putting out there is almost just following on that journey. And I think that's what people miss, I guess.
It's so funny. And as you were saying that thing about coffee shops, I've literally just had my latest photo shoot in my local coffee shop because it's I was like laughing internally to myself because I think I basically fund, me and my team, because we're all local now, we basically fund the coffee shop. We are like the only people in there Monday to Thursday. It's only on Fridays that like working mums and stuff show up around lunchtime. But other than that, we're there so often that they've actually offered us a tab now. They're like, look, you can just pay at the end of the week if you want. So we literally go there all week, and we're like, oh, it's like getting free lunches. And then on a Friday, we're like, right, who's paying for it this week?
So I'll let you off then, because that's acceptable. If you're there all the time, that's fine.
Funny, they were actually up for sale recently, and the guys who worked there were like, Jess, what do you think about having another business? And I was like, don't tempt me, because I could get free coffee for life. Like this would just be the best kind of day. But it is true, the cookie cutter model is everywhere, and it's funny because it goes through so many stages in pictures and also in words. I remember starting out and everything was like pastel colors in front of the Eiffel Tower, everyone was glamorous and lovely. Now everyone's in front of like graffitied walls, and they're in like their bitch badass boss, as my coach Ali Brown would say, heels, and they're rebels and this and that. And I'm just like, oh, for Christ's sake, like, is nobody just normal anymore? Because if I look at my day to day, I mean, what we're recording at about 11:30 in the morning on a Monday now. For me, I've been out for a dog walk this morning. I've got back. I'm in trackies, and after I've done this, I'm going to go over to the coffee shop. I'm going to grab my skinny latte for the day. Maybe I'll stay there for a couple of hours and work over lunch, and then I'm going to come back. But we're so desperate sometimes, I think, to have a brand that we're not actually normal. We're not showing people, what is real life looking like, and that sometimes is late nights, working until goodness knows when to get a project finished. And other times it is, I've taken the day off and going to the water park with my friends because I've got nothing else that I need to do.
Yeah, I've just been working with like a brand designer, and the biggest thing that I said to her, so we were talking about like her brand and how she was going to like show up. So she wants to niche specifically for mums, and I was like, so don't just show this perfect life of like how motherhood should be, with you just having a lovely like sit and smile with your child. I was like, imagine if you just showed up to your audience and you actually showed what being like a mum and juggling a business was really like, and you actually spoke to them about that. You'd be so much more appealing, and it would be so much more fun. Like, imagine if she's like, oh, I could be sitting at my desk and my daughter's constantly like, mum. Like, imagine if you captured that in like a in a photograph, like it would be so much more fun. And I think people want to see the real you. Like, they don't want to see, I think gone are the days where people want to see something you're not. And I think that's something I'm really passionate about. It's just showing up as the true you. Like, there's no point putting on airs and graces and being something you're not. Like, I think it's just so much better to just be yourself, and actually, like, people are going to love you or hate you, and actually that's kind of the easiest way to make that decision, and then you attract the right people all the time, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. So when we're talking about this, then this idea of like showing up as the real you and polarizing, what's your kind of stance on that? You know, is it, do we take it to the nth degree? You know, because what we can obviously see, some people have made very, very successful careers like JP Sears in having a brand that takes things to that extreme just to show people what could be possible, and it's more for comedic and shock value than necessarily education and learning. And then obviously his trainings are much more valuable if not the same. Or is it, you know, genuinely about the day to day? Because obviously I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to their brand, they think that the day to day is mundane because it's normal to them. It's not exciting or glamorous or different necessarily to what their ideal client themselves might actually be doing.
But I think that your ideal client wants to know who you are. I think there's so many people out there now that do exactly, like, if I think about brand designers, oh my goodness, there's millions of them, right? So how am I going to show up and be different? Well, I'm going to attract the people that do think that my day-to-day is interesting, because we might find it boring, we're living it, but actually our potential clients, like in our audience, want to see that behind the scenes, that we're a real person. But you know what? I think there is a fine line, and it's something that I think is a very blurry line, because I think that you can take it a step too far. You have to set within your boundaries what you're happy to talk about, what you're happy to show, and then you have to embrace that. And I think that this doesn't mean you can't have a private life, and like you have to show all. And I always say, you know, like, if you don't want to show a photo of you with your hair in a bun sitting on the sofa eating a pizza with like tomato sauce around your face, then fair enough, like, you don't want to show that. But I mean, I'm forever showing up when I look a little bit disheveled, to the point that I've actually had people say, oh my god, I want to brush her hair, and I'm like, oh thanks, that's really lovely of you. But I think I just think that we should just be real, and we show what we want to show, what we're comfortable with showing, because if you're not comfortable with it, it will be all over your face, you know what I mean? Like, you can't hide them emotions of not feeling comfortable, so we have to show as much as we're prepared to show.
So what does that actually mean for your brand though? Because I guess, you know, and it's one of the things I get what you're saying about, you know, show what you want to show and things like that, but ultimately, like we've already kind of discussed, branding isn't just about images. It's not about, okay, well, here's the behind the scenes while I'm sat on Instagram or whatever, because I think people are now way more savvy to the fact that certain platforms are giving them a look inside a business. You know, Instagram is obviously for people who want to look behind the scenes at a business. Facebook is more if you want the tailored marketing and the stylized shots and things like that. But the purpose of building a congruent brand ultimately is if we're trying to attract those right people and repel the people who aren't the best fit for us. You know, what is the kind of line that's drawn under the difference, I guess, between branding and marketing for you?
So I think it's all around. So I think we need to be more opinionated, more bold, so that we are pushing away the wrong people. And actually, you know what, like, that's not a bad thing. Like, I have done many a live and many a post on things that I'm super passionate about. It's all about getting people talking, I think, and that can be in a good way or in a, like, not everyone's going to agree with you way, and I think that's completely fine. And I think I think now we have to embrace stronger opinions, because otherwise you just blend in to everybody else. Like, by a mile, my best marketing pieces of content are ones where I'm being a little bit more like bold and a little bit bolshy sometimes, like, in the sense where I'm just like, this is what I think, like, and I think people need to hear that. And I think you create more of a loyal sort of following and people that are really aligned to how you think and feel if you are just showing up with what you actually believe.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think for me, the clear difference, I guess, between branding and marketing is more branding comes first. It's how you craft that message. It's how you decide what you're going to stand for, what your core business values are, and how you're going to put them forward in your copy and your images so that people see a well-rounded, congruent business owner. Whereas marketing is pushing that out across the channels that are going to work best for people to find you. And so for me, there's always that interesting line around, well, when we're building a brand, then given what we know about the industry and given that we know that people are likely going to be buying courses from people around marketing and sales and things like that that are saying, do this way, do that way, how do we actually, you know, ensure that we build a brand that tailors to our core values, that tailors to who we are as business owners, regardless of the marketing and sales channels and strategies that we go on to use? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. So I think no matter what I learn, I always want to make sure that I've got my twist on it. So a massive part of what I do is I'll either, so what makes the way I say things that is my brand, if you know what I mean, is the fact that everything's got my twist on it. So everything I learn, like obviously I'm going to action things that I learn from other people. Like I'm a firm believer that I always need to continue learning, but I always want to put my twist on every single thing that I've learned. So that's where your brand comes in, because you can't just put something out there that's the same as everybody else because you've been taught it that way. Like there's always ways to put your twist on things that comes down to your brand and your message, because we're not only going to just have, like, we'll obviously all have like one main message, like what we really stand for as entrepreneurs, but there'll be other things that you're passionate for, which sort of comes down into your values and your beliefs and how you position yourself as that entrepreneur, that I think is the key here, because that's your uniqueness, that's your twist. So it doesn't matter what you learn, like what marketing skills you're told to do, whether it's to be on Facebook and how to use Facebook, or how to use Instagram and how to use all these different marketing platforms, but you can still put your own twist on how you do that. We don't want to do that cookie cutter. So that's where your brand comes in, because your brand is what makes you you. So no matter what you learn, if you always come back to that message, I always talk to people about like a messaging filter. If you always come back to your messages and what you really stand for as an entrepreneur, and you use that as a filter for every single thing that you do, that's how your brand sort of grounds you and positions you where you want to be. So I'm always constantly just going back and thinking about, is that in line with my message? Am I doing this because I'm being told to do it? And that might work and that's great, but how have I put my twist on it so it's still in line with who I am as a brand?
Okay, that's so it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, you know, I think a lot of people get confused and are confused by, you know, what does branding really mean to their business in terms of ROI? You know, what's the return investment of having a brand? Because so often we're seeing, you know, branding experts who are saying, yeah, you can't make money without having a brand. And you know, I think that some people unknowingly have brands before they actually start, because they already have their core values, they already have clear messaging, but they don't necessarily have the visuals and things like that that back it up. So where do you think the ROI comes from the branding perspective? Is it that, you know, even there when it's perhaps unknown, or is it something that people who are perhaps a little bit further along in business need to invest in and see an ROI in?
Do you know what? I think there's two things here. So there's the difference between building a brand and your branding. So your brand is obviously all the things we've been speaking about up until now. It's everything that you're known for. Like if you imagine like a tin label, like that's essentially like your brand. It's like the name, the description, and then like the stuff that's inside. I think that's like your brand. But your branding is like the visual representation of it. So your logos, your websites, the things you put out on social media, all of that sort of stuff. So that's the visual stuff. And I guess the ROI on the visual stuff is if you think of like the difference of like a high street bag of mulberry, and I always use this analogy because I remember how much I wanted a mulberry handbag when I first started out. And I always decided when I had my first 10K month, that was my goal, buying a mulberry handbag. I'm going to walk into that shop with my actual debit card and not a credit card. I'm going to buy this mulberry handbag. And oh my goodness, like the day it happened, I was like the most ecstatic. Like it was my first like achievement that I felt like I'd made
I love my mulberry. Bayswater's.
Oh my gosh, give me a mulberry handbag any day. Like now I feel like I'm gonna have to just have one like all the time, like one every year. But if you think about the difference between, I used to always just before then, like completely like hands up, had high street bags. And if you actually look at the difference between a high street bag and a mulberry handbag, the only difference is that logo that's on the front of a mulberry handbag. So the ROI based on your brand is your brand helps you position yourself at wherever you want to be priced. So it can be the difference for buying a high street bag that's 25 quid, 60 quid even, to buying a mulberry handbag that's £1,000. Like, it's all about that brand. That brand is the reason that I've bought that mulberry handbag, because actually if you look at a standard mulberry handbag, like mine's very plain. Like I could probably buy without the logo on it the same thing in a high street shop. So it's the brand that's made me go, I want to pay £1,000 for a branded mulberry handbag. So your brand has the power for you to be able to start to charge what you're worth. Your brand is almost like that glue that holds everything together, that makes you be able to say, look, like I'm worth this much now. Like, and I think that's the difference. So I believe firmly that people probably should have some form, like the brand element, all the messaging and the values and all the things we were speaking about just before. I think that they're like the foundations of like your business. I think it's what makes you different from everybody else that's out there, and you'll certainly grow and accelerate quicker if you've got that, all of that stuff sorted in the beginning, because you'll stand out more. I think branding is your way to showcase that. And so I always say, like, you know, when like you go on somebody's website, if a website's been done properly, it looks, feels and sounds like you, and you take your client on a journey. So by the time they're then on the phone with you and they're on a discovery call and they're sort of in a position where they might book, you're just solidifying by that point, because your website has done 80 to 90% of the selling for you, because everything that's on there is taking them through that journey. So it's almost, I guess the best way to describe it is that it's almost doing the work for you. It's shouting for you, and then you can concentrate on like just being yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's an easier way to kind of explain it. I like the point you made there about the difference between brand and branding. And I think, again, there's always that piece. I think we had Nick Smith come on the podcast might be about 6-7 weeks ago now. Her episode aired, and she made a similar point around, you know, you either build a brand or you build a business. And I think that's quite an interesting point to kind of reference here, in that they are two very different things. Like, yes, as a solopreneur, absolutely, you can 100% have a personal brand, but the business that you build with that might be very, very different than the business that ultimately a national or global or international brand is looking to build as part of their business strategy. It's always an interesting thing to consider. Like you brought up, obviously Mulberry, they are huge, and part of their branding ultimately involves getting famous people to hold their handbags. And as part of their branding, you know, they absolutely leverage certain types of celebrity and PR and things like that to be featured in as many places as possible, to show that kind of aspirational desire. Whereas if you look at, you know, the majority of personal brands in the online space, people are using that in a, not necessarily a smaller way, but they're not intending for their businesses to necessarily end up at that scale. So it's really interesting to see the difference between how a global or international brand is going to market themselves and market their products and use their branding values and mission statements and messaging and images, versus a personal brand, which, you know, like you're saying today, is much more reliant on you as a person and how you are planning on showing up. It doesn't mean that either is necessarily more successful or better. It's just an interesting comparison to make. And I think one of the things that you all need to be taking away from this episode is that ultimately you have to decide what kind of business you want to build. If you want to build a business that is mainly you as a personal brand, that is a solopreneur business, that is going to be capped, not necessarily at a revenue level, but at a level where you cap your interaction with your audience and deciding, like Nicki said earlier, about where your boundary is, or whether you want to build a, you know, a global or international brand that ultimately perhaps is designed so that you can sell your business in the next 5 to 10 years, and you build that to scale, and the brand is less about you and who you are and more about the business, the results, the transformation that it can get.
And I do think that's huge, because you definitely, I think when you're thinking about the brand that you're building, have to consider whether or not you're going to sell your business at the end of it, because it's all well and good having like a really strong personal brand, but then that's all based on you. And we have to be careful then, because selling that business is going to be really, really tough, because you can never be that person again, if you know what I mean. Like if you sell that business, then along goes you with it, if you know what I mean. Like that business, it almost ends. So I think it's really important to make that decision and decide where you see your business being in the long run. And actually that comes down to sort of like planning and deciding where you want to be, doesn't it? Because, you know, I think as a entrepreneur, like a solopreneur, like you said, I think being a personal brand is imperative, because there's so many other people doing exactly what you do. So like putting yourself at the front of it is going to be the easiest way to differentiate. But obviously if you're then planning in the future to sell that on, that's going to be really difficult to sell on.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the most famous examples, I think, over the last probably 15 years is obviously Jo Malone. He built a really strong personal brand. She called it Jo Malone, and she built it in her bathtub, you know, and it was famous for that. And when she decided that she wanted to scale and grow that business and ultimately sell it off, she effectively had to sell her own name, you know. And it's not a decision that you make in the beginning. Like I didn't really look at when I started my business whether I wanted a business that I wanted to sell or a business I wanted to, you know, become a personal brand. But it's something that I believe you need to reassess regularly and make changes with. You know, my entire business was always branded as Jessica Lorimer. We had all the URLs and all that kind of thing for the first couple of years. And it wasn't until I brought my book out and decided to call it Smartly to Sell that I actually preferred that. And I thought, well, no, you know, in 10 years time, if I don't want to necessarily be the head of the business, if I don't necessarily want to be the person who's creating the content or teaching or coaching or whatever, I can't sell that. Despite the revenue levels that we've achieved, I can't ever sell it or do anything with it because it's so reliant on me participating in it. Whereas changing it over to Smartly to Sell, you know, we've obviously got the podcast that, honestly, I mean, I hate to say this, Pollies, but anyone could do it. Like if anyone wanted to step up and do that in sort of 5-10 years time, and wanted to kind of keep the show along the lines of the core brand values that the business has around honesty, integrity, fun, giving value, anyone could do it. It would just be a different voice at the microphone. It'd be a different person, you know, writing the blogs and things like that. It's not a decision you have to make now, but it is definitely something you need to think about and reassess when it comes to your branding, which I guess leads me on to my final question for you, Nicki. How often do you think that your branding needs to change or be assessed? You know, what does that look like in the world of a business owner?
So I think it massively comes down to like almost like your year strategy, and looking at that as well and making sure that that is still aligned with who you are. I think there's a lot of people that will say that you need to rebrand every sort of few years, but I think you rebrand as your business changes and pivots and evolves and grows, because that's when your message tweaks with you. I look at my message like all the time. Like I'm always making sure that it's aligned with where I'm going, what I'm doing. That it doesn't always have to be like this ginormous like rebrand. Like, yeah, like if your business is changing directions or your brand no longer is on the same par with where your business is, of course you need a rebrand. But I think it can be sometimes just as simple as adjusting your message as you grow and just adjusting the way you put things out there. So like it doesn't always need to be like this ginormous big like whole visual branding rebrand. And I think that's something certainly to consider, because that actually can go the opposite way and you'll look really confused if you're forever changing the look and feel of your brand. So I think it's almost better to make the smaller adaptations as you're going along and be looking at them sometimes even on a monthly basis. Like you know exactly what it's like how things can change as new ideas and opportunities come in, or you're looking down to look at your year strategy and actually you're like, like that's quite interesting. Like, am I actually getting that across now with my message? Because that needs to be looked at all the time, I think. But the actual visuals and things like that, like, yeah, maybe every few years, but only if you need to. Like, you don't need to just change it for the sake of changing it. If it's still in line with who you are and it's still in keeping with who you are as a person, then that's fine. Or a business, obviously.
Totally. And you can always add other brands in. You know, I know a lot of people who've done it really successfully. They've mastered one brand, they have something that doesn't fit into that area, and they're like, right, okay, we're just going to set up a separate brand for that, which is always quite nice, I think. And it gives it that little bit of definition from the main brand as well. You know, clothing designers do it a lot, where they'll have separate brands for their kids ranges, or if they bring in like a specific range of jeans or whatever like that, they'll do something that's different, and they'll set up a separate brand for it, just to see if it will grow any differently. And I always think that's quite an interesting concept as well.
I also think your like message and your audience are very different for different things that you offer. So sometimes it works and you can umbrella everything under your personal brand, for instance, and then have lots of things that sit under it. And sometimes they're so far apart that you have no choice but to do two separate things. Like, if you think about it realistically, like somebody that's buying, like for clothing, for instance, as you used as an example, a woman that's buying sort of like really amazing clothing that she wants to aspire to look like these models that she's looking at, and a woman that's buying sort of kids clothing could be quite different. So in which case they've got two different audiences, and sometimes they'll gel and they'll work together, and you can use that all under like an umbrella brand of, for instance, your name or the name of your business. And sometimes they just need to be split. And that's why I was saying about the fact that you need to be continuously looking at it, because what you don't want to fall into the trap of is fitting 500 different things under one brand and then it just being a confused message. Because what needs to happen is every time a new potential client or even a current client looks at you, they need to be able to understand, like, really, really quickly. Like, people don't have time to like have to really like read every single thing to be able to understand exactly what you do. Like, it needs to be short, simple, to the point. Like, you almost need to be able to say what you do, like, as in like in a dummified way, like, so that people can just get it straight away. Because the people you're talking to are really busy. We're all really busy now. There's so much noise out there, so everything needs to be simple. So actually sometimes like having too many different things that sit under one brand can be the most confusing thing ever, and it's almost better to like strip it back. If you need to create two brands, do, because you'll find it a lot easier as well. Like, once that message is sorted for like each part of your brand, or just for your one sort of umbrella brand, and you've got that message sorted, everything you put out there becomes so much easier, because you've got this sort of messaging filter that you can run everything through to make sure that it aligns with what your brand is.
Awesome. I like that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been awesome to have you here. Where can people find you if they need more Nicki in their lives, if they want all the idea of branding? Where's the best place for them to connect and find you?
So either in my Facebook group, the B Studio, or I'm obviously on Instagram and Facebook as B by Nicki, or just Brand You on Instagram. Because I was a little bit like you as well, and I had B by Nicki on Instagram, and I looked at it and went, yeah, but it's just not strong enough. Like, what can I do that's different? And yeah, so I literally only just started up in the last few months my new Instagram channel called Just Brand You, because it's very in line with who I am. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. So there you go, guys. If you've enjoyed today's episode and there are any key takeaways or aha moments that you would like to share with me and Nicki, make sure you head over onto Instagram and tell us what your big win was. I hope you have epic Fridays and weekends lined up filled with wine and Netflix. That is definitely what I'm going to be doing this weekend. And I will see you in Monday's episode.